They gave her a seat as a joke. She took the table without ever cracking a smile. The mansion on Mulholland glittered past midnight like a stacked deck, every window a card face, every chandelier a silent wager. Bentley coupes lined the drive, idling as valets ferried Rolex wrists and champagne laughter into the marble foyer. Inside, nobody noticed the black woman in a pressed gray uniform moving along the corridor with a silver tray. She kept her eyes lowered, back straight, quiet and observant, logging every voice, every tell. They called her Amara in passing, never Ms. Hayes. Names were chips these people rarely cashed for the help. Amara eased into the poker room just long enough to refill crystal tumblers. Mahogany walls, cigar haze, a green felt table seating 6 millionaires and 1 bored celebrity. They didn't see her, but she saw the river card flash by, 7 of hearts. That made billionaire Grant Maxwell's flush draw dead. He didn't know it yet. He was too busy winking at the actress on his lap. Maxwell leaned back when he spotted Amara leaving. His lips twisted into a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Hey you, housekeeping," he called, waving a cluster of black and red chips. "Ever play Texas Hold'em?" The room chuckled. Someone muttered, "She cleans tables, not sits at one." Amara paused at the doorway. "I know the rules," she said softly. Maxwell's grin widened. "Tell you what, shuffle up and deal the next hand. If you're brave, play a round. Loser clears tonight's ashtrays." Laughter rippled through the room. He thought that was punishment. Amara took the deck without hesitation. Her shuffle sounded like rain on glass, clean, fast, and practiced. One guest raised an eyebrow. When she burned a card, her fingers floated precise as a croupier's. She dealt 5 community cards face down in a single, elegant fan. Maxwell smirked. "Not bad for a mop jockey." Amara's eyes flicked to his chip stack. Messy towers. No counting routine. She already had him figured out. Thumb-tapping meant he was bluffing. Nose flare meant confidence. But he had no poker face. Just poker privilege. As Maxwell peeled his hole cards, Amara's mind drifted. Back to a shotgun house in Southside Chicago. She was 9, kneeling beside her grandfather at a sticky kitchen table. He'd been barred from casinos in 1963 for being too good, too black, or both. He always said dice had 2 faces, chance and justice. He taught her to count odds by reading the rhythm of raindrops on the window. "Never blink at arrogance, baby," Grandpa used to whisper, sliding battered cards across linoleum. "It masks more than fear. It masks ignorance, and ignorance pays." Back in the present, she set the tray aside and slid into the empty chair like she belonged there. The first card she lifted was the King of Spades. She didn't blink. The room smelled of money and misplaced confidence, 2 things Amara had spent a lifetime sweeping into dustpans. She was ready to play. Maxwell leaned forward, licking his lips like the pot already belonged to him. "All right, Miss Maid," he said, his voice syrupy with arrogance. "Let's see if your luck matches your folding skills." Amara didn't respond. She wasn't playing for laughs. Not for the crowd. Not for the optics. The first 3 cards flopped onto the felt. A 9 of clubs, 10 of spades, and a queen of hearts. Maxwell's eyes lit up. Amara didn't flinch. She glanced once, then again at the players, not the cards. One man clenched his jaw. Another adjusted his watch unnecessarily. The tells were screaming. The turn card came, 5 of diamonds. No help to most. Maxwell's fingers twitched. He leaned back with mock ease, but his heel bounced under the table. A beginner's bluff. Amara stayed calm. She'd seen this same body language from spoiled sons in prep school chess matches her grandfather used to sneak her into. They assumed they were in control because they paid for the board. Maxwell pushed his chips forward. All in. The room erupted. Cheers, gasps, jeers. This was entertainment to them. A game of humiliation masked as charity. Amara's hands moved slow, controlled. Call. Gasps again, louder this time. Even the actress looked up from her phone. They flipped their cards. Maxwell had a pair of queens. Amara revealed her hand. A straight. 8, 9, 10, Jack, Queen. Dead silence. The air collapsed like a balloon. Someone choked on their drink. The room froze. Maxwell stared at the felt, blinking. Wait, what? Amara didn't smile. She just whispered, Flush draw was dead. You committed too early. He was still processing the loss when one of the other players, an older man in a charcoal suit, tilted his head. Where did you learn to play like that? Amara stood slowly, picking up her tray again. Family tradition, she said. We weren't allowed inside casinos, so we learned to beat the ones who were. And then she was gone, slipping through the crowd like steam off a pot of boiled pride. Maxwell sat motionless, staring at the chips she left behind. They weren't hers anymore. They were trophies. But the worst part wasn't the money. It was that the staff had stopped pretending not to watch. They had seen it. Every single one of them. The housekeeper didn't just play the game. She owned the room. Later that night, in the hush of the staff kitchen, Amara leaned against a fridge, sipping warm tea out of a chipped mug. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered just enough to be annoying. Someone had forgotten to sweep the corner near the trash bin. But she liked the quiet here. This was the only place in the mansion that didn't lie. Across from her, Julio, the night cook, stood wide-eyed. Tell me again what he said after you laid down that hand. Amara smirked slightly. He didn't say anything. His jaw just kind of hung there. Julio burst out laughing. Man thought he was Daniel Negreanu. Couldn't read a grocery list. A knock on the door interrupted their laughter. It was Elise, the mansion's assistant manager, slightly breathless, clipboard in hand. Elise, Amara said, standing straighter. Something wrong? Elise hesitated, shifting uncomfortably. Mr. Traymore wants to speak with you. Julio's face dropped. Wait, the Mr. Traymore? Maxwell's father? Amara nodded, hiding the sudden knot in her stomach. Where is he? Elise pointed. He's in the game room. Said he doesn't want to be disturbed by anyone else. That room. Again. Amara followed Elise out, her sneakers quiet on the marble floors. She passed portraits of men who'd never been challenged and staircases that twisted like secrets. At the door to the game room, she paused. Behind it, laughter hummed low like a warning. But it wasn't the kind of laughter from earlier. It was quieter now. Heavier. She stepped inside. The elder Traymore was alone at the table, swirling a glass of scotch and staring down at a new deck of cards spread across the felt. He didn't look up when he spoke. You humiliated my son, he said casually. Amara didn't flinch. He invited me. Now he looked up, his eyes glassy but focused. Do you know what this house runs on, Ms. Amara, she said flatly. And yes, I know exactly what it runs on. He studied her, more curious now than angry. You're not just good. You're trained. She shrugged. My grandfather wasn't allowed in casinos. But the legends couldn't beat him. They banned him in '68. Traymore leaned back, slowly. I remember that name. Ellis Monroe? Her jaw tightened. That was him. A silence passed between them. Not cold, just reverent. Then Traymore chuckled. "Well," he said, lifting his glass, "I guess the house doesn't always win." Amara didn't smile, but she nodded. Then she turned, walking out the same way she'd entered, quiet, calm, with nothing in her hands, but everything in her power. The door shut softly behind her. The next morning, sunlight cut through the high windows of the mansion like judgment. Amara moved through the hallways with her usual grace, but something in the air had shifted. The other staff members, normally chatty during morning prep, were quiet, stealing glances at her over coffee mugs and folded linens. By the time she reached the staff locker room, there was already a sticky note on her locker. "Don't get too comfortable." No signature, just anger, scrawled in ink. Amara peeled it off slowly. She didn't react. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a photo, her grandfather Ellis Monroe, grinning next to an old jazz trumpeter and a worn felt poker table in a Harlem lounge. He looked free, unapologetic, a man who couldn't be caged by rules built to keep him small. She folded the photo neatly and tucked it back into her wallet. Some legacies couldn't be erased by whispers. Later that day, as she scrubbed baseboards in the main hallway, Maxwell Traymore strutted past her like nothing had happened. A pair of aviator sunglasses clung to his face despite the indoor lighting. He didn't look at her, but he made sure everyone else heard. "She's lucky I let her win," he said to a guest on his phone. "Some people get one lucky hand and think they're royalty." Amara kept scrubbing. She didn't even blink. But inside, she was memorizing every syllable. In the game of power, silence was her shield, and memory, her weapon. Later that evening, while preparing dinner settings, Elise pulled her aside with a soft warning. "They're saying you embarrassed him," she whispered, eyes scanning the room. "He's not used to losing. And his friends, they're not just rich. They're connected." "I'm not here to make friends," Amara replied. "I'm here to survive." Elise hesitated. "Then be careful. The higher you climb in a house like this, the faster they try to push you off the stairs." 3 nights later, the party returned. Louder, sharper, meaner. The poker table was back in the private game room, this time lit by a low-hanging chandelier that cast long, judgmental shadows. Traymore's guests had multiplied. New faces arrived in Italian loafers and silk scarves, women draped in couture with expressions that dared you to blink first. Amara wasn't invited. She watched through the slight crack in the kitchen's swinging door as cigars were lit and laughter filled the air. The echo of last week's humiliation hadn't faded. It had fermented, hardened. "Is the Queen of Clubs coming back?" someone jeered. "She probably thinks one game makes her royalty," another chimed in, holding a tumbler of whiskey like it was a crown. Maxwell didn't laugh. He just shuffled the cards with military precision. His smile was hollow, too sharp at the corners. Revenge had already replaced amusement. In the kitchen, Elise hovered beside Amara, towel in hand, tension radiating off her like steam from a boiling pot. "They want you to come back," Elise said softly. Amara didn't turn. "Why?" "Because this time they want to watch you lose." Amara stared straight ahead. The floor creaked beneath her feet as if it knew what came next. "I only play when there's something worth winning," she said, her voice even. "You already won their pride," Elise whispered. Amara finally looked at her. "Then maybe I'll take something more permanent this time." The next evening, an invitation arrived, hand-delivered on thick cardstock, sealed with wax bearing Traymore's family crest. It wasn't addressed to Ms. Amara. It read, "The Lady of Luck, Elise gasped when she saw it. "They're baiting you," she whispered. Amara smiled. "I know." She didn't wear a dress that night. She wore what she always wore, her pressed navy housekeeping blouse, now tucked into clean slacks. But under that blouse, just beneath the top buttons, was a glimpse of her grandfather's old poker pin. Silver, tarnished, and shaped like a royal flush. The one he used to wear when he was banned from every table in the South. When she entered the game room, the noise dulled. Maxwell Traymore looked up from the head of the table, lips curled in that same smug crescent. "You brought your mop with you, or just the luck?" Amara didn't flinch. "I cleaned the table last week. Thought I'd do it again." Laughter spread around the room. Nervous, jagged. Maxwell gestured to the empty seat. "You want in?" "Only if we're playing for more than chips this time." He leaned back. "What did you have in mind?" Amara pulled out a folded envelope and slid it across the table. Everyone leaned in. Inside, a copy of the mansion's property tax bill. In her name. Gasps, then silence. Maxwell's smile cracked. "I had it evaluated 2 weeks ago," Amara said calmly. "The East Wing's zoning expired. You've been in violation. That makes you vulnerable." "You think you're clever?" he muttered. "I know I'm ready to raise the stakes." The game began with the kind of hush that usually follows thunder. Amara sat opposite Maxwell, her expression unreadable, her hands still. Cards shuffled in slow rhythm. Chips clicked like loaded dice. Every seat around the oval table was now filled, but all eyes darted between just 2 players. Maxwell leaned in, voice low but icy. "You really think you're going to walk away with something that belongs to my family?" Amara didn't blink. It never really did. The first hand was light, just chips. Amara played it simple, folded early, observed. The second she baited. Raised once, let Maxwell double it, then folded again with a soft, patient smile. By the third, whispers crept in from the sideline crowd. "She's not playing to win hands," someone murmured. "She's mapping him." Maxwell grew more animated, grinning, boasting, tapping his Rolex against the felt with each win. But it wasn't just Amara he was trying to beat. It was the story in the room, the one no one wanted to say aloud, that the help had him on edge. The fourth hand changed everything. Maxwell raised without looking at his cards. The table chuckled. Amara matched him, then raised again. Maxwell glanced up. "You bluffing?" "No," she said. "You are." He scoffed and called. Cards turned over. Amara's quiet pair of 9s beat his scattered mess. A ripple of surprise shot through the room. That's when Maxwell's voice dropped. "You think one win means anything?" Amara tilted her head. "It's not about one win. It's about how you're losing." By the fifth hand, the room had changed. No more laughter, no more murmured bets or playful banter, just tension, thick and electric, hanging over velvet and mahogany. Maxwell's shirt collar looked tighter now, his smile thinner, his ego fraying. Amara, still calm, still statuesque in posture. She placed each card deliberately, each chip with intention. He leaned across the table. "Don't get cocky, sweetheart. This is just a game." Amara met his gaze without blinking. "You think I don't know that's how you see it?" She raised again. Not dramatically, just enough to make his hand tremble when he reached for his chips. He called. And lost. Another pile slid to Amara. The staff behind her, the ones who'd once been invisible to this room, began shifting forward. watching closer, quietly cheering. Sixth hand. Maxwell tried to reset, flashed teeth, told a loud story about poker in Monaco with celebrities. Amara let him talk, let him bluff, then snapped the story in half with a flush he never saw coming. He stared at her cards for a beat too long, like he couldn't believe they were real, like she wasn't supposed to be capable of that. "You memorize the deck," he muttered. "That's not luck." Amara gently pushed the chips toward her side. "Number, that's math." Maxwell's fiancée, who had been scrolling through her phone with boredom for most of the night, finally looked up, then stood. "Max," she said flatly, "do you even know who she is?" Maxwell ignored her. "She's the maid." "No," Amara said, pushing in a stack of chips for the seventh hand. "I'm the daughter of a man who taught me cards before I learned algebra. The same man your grandfather banned from every casino in the 60s. Because he couldn't beat him either." Silence. The cards hit the table like thunder. Final hand. Maxwell wiped his palms against his designer slacks, but the sweat wouldn't stop. His voice, once booming and boastful, had dropped to a tight, graveled whisper. The private room felt smaller now. The chandeliers too bright. The silence too loud. Amara didn't say a word. She simply looked at her cards, as if they were old friends, and tapped her fingers once against the felt. A rhythm. Maxwell raised. Amara didn't flinch. She raised back everything. Gasps rippled across the room. A few servants watching from the doorway instinctively leaned in, as if witnessing history. "You're bluffing," Maxwell muttered. Amara tilted her head. "That's your story. You should stick to it." He pushed all in, slammed it, really, like anger would give him leverage. When the cards turned, it was over before it began. Maxwell had a decent hand, a low straight, enough to beat most people. But Amara didn't come for most. She laid down a royal flush. Dead silence. Then a single voice, from the chef at the back, let out a low, stunned, "Damn." Maxwell sat frozen, as if maybe if he didn't move, the humiliation would skip him. But it didn't. Amara reached forward, not for the chips, but for the envelope at the edge of the table. The envelope marked with red wax. The deed. You're taking the house?" Maxwell choked. "No," Amara said gently. "I already own the house. I just came to take back what your grandfather cheated my grandfather out of. Dignity." She rose. The room parted. And as she walked out, the guests and staff looked at her not with pity or amusement, but reverence. Somewhere behind her, Maxwell's fiancée whispered, "She beat you before she even sat down." Amara paused at the door, just long enough to say, they didn't remember her name, but they'd never forget her silence. It started as murmurs, barely whispers, echoing between cigar smoke and stemmed crystal. The poker night that shattered egos had turned into legend. In West Hollywood's wealthiest corners, it wasn't just a story. It was a warning. They whispered about the hand like it was a myth, the way she called his bluff without blinking, how the river card landed like a verdict. The tale twisted with each retelling. In some versions, she smirked. In others, she didn't speak at all. But the part that never changed? She won. And she left without counting the chips. The red velvet chair at the poker table sat empty, its former occupant absent from every gathering since. No one dared take that seat. It wasn't reserved. It was untouchable. A valet, the same one who once opened doors without eye contact, now offered a deferential nod when she passed. The chef, who used to hum through dishes, stopped when she entered, just to listen. She didn't wear anything loud, just slacks, a pressed white blouse, but the energy in the room bent around her like a gravitational field. In her pocket, something hard and flat pressed into her leg. The deed. The actual notarized deed to the millionaire's prized poker table, signed over in shame, lost on a night he never speaks of. She entered her modest apartment with slow grace, not tired, just full. On the mantel sat a black and white photo, her grandfather, sharp-eyed in suspenders, leaning over a felt table, chips stacked with surgical precision. She pulled the chip from her coat pocket, the same one that clinched the final hand, and placed it beside the photo. Then she reached for a velvet box. Inside, a gold plate etched with 2 words. "Play back." She smiled, then closed the box. At the country club where laughter once came easy, the air now tasted like regret. A new staff orientation had begun, and whispers swirled around the break room like steam off a bad coffee pot. Everyone knew the story, even the newcomers. No one mentioned names, but the lesson was stitched into every side-eye glance and lowered voice. Never underestimate the quiet ones. Especially not the woman who once folded napkins in the back kitchen and now held part ownership in the very estate where her dignity had once been questioned. The millionaire hadn't shown his face in weeks. Some said he was in therapy. Others said he left town altogether. What was certain was this: his name was removed from the club's guest board, his usual spot in the poker room left dark, untouched, the felt table covered like a casket. She hadn't gloated. She never spoke about the win. That made it worse. Legacy isn't just what you build. It's what others whisper when you leave the room. And her name, once mumbled with condescension, now drew silence, reverence, even fear. A young Latina housekeeper stood outside the main dining hall clutching a tray, visibly shaken after a guest snapped at her. The woman paused, eyes stinging. She hadn't even made it through week 1. And then she felt it, a hand gently placed on hers. The former housekeeper, now a silent legend. No words exchanged. Just a look, a nod, a reminder. Dignity is not given. It's taken back. That night, when the cleaning crew gathered outside, she didn't join the poker game. She just watched. From the edge of the patio, she held a warm mug and listened as they laughed, unaware of the symbol they played beside. The table, her table, the mansion's poker room had changed. Not in decor, same velvet chairs, same low-hanging chandelier, but in air. Where it once pulsed with arrogance and wine-soaked confidence, now it carried the weight of something rarer: reverence. At the center of it all sat the old table, polished, gleaming, untouched since that night. She never asked for it, but the staff had taken to calling it her table. That Friday evening, she returned, not for poker, but for closure. She entered in silence. The new house manager greeted her with a nod. No snide comments, no condescension, just quiet acknowledgement. The same men who once sneered now avoided her gaze. They weren't afraid of her money. They were afraid of what she represented. She walked slowly past the table, trailing her fingers over the grain. The red circle drawn on the felt during that legendary hand had never quite washed out. It pulsed under the light, a scar, and a reminder. She paused by the chair where the millionaire once sat. No need to sit there again. She turned to leave, her heels echoing on the marble like punctuation. On the way out, a teenage busboy looked up from stacking chairs. "Is it true?" he asked softly. "You beat them with nothing in your hand?" She smiled. "No," she said. "I beat them with everything in my heart." She disappeared into the night, leaving the door ajar and the legend alive. They invited her as a joke. She didn't just take their chips, she took the game, the room, and the story they'd be telling for the rest of their lives.